Hi, everyone. We've set up this Being an Engineer podcast as an industry knowledge repository, if you will. We hope it'll be a tool where engineers can learn about and connect with other companies, technologies, people, resources, and opportunities. So make some connections and enjoy the show.
But I found myself always asking this question of, why are we building this? Are we building the right thing, right? Sometimes it's difficult to actually get the technology to work or to get the clinicals to work, but that doesn't seem to be the hardest part right now. The hardest part is, should we build it, not can we build it?
Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of the Being an Engineer podcast. Today we have the absolute privilege to speak with Aaron Call. Aaron is the innovative founding principal of Jaunt, a company specializing in market intelligence and strategic decision-making for the medical device industry. With a rich background in biomedical engineering and product management, Aaron has been instrumental in guiding both startups and established enterprises through the complex landscape of medical technology. His expertise extends to Class 1 and Class 2 medical devices, digital health technologies, and he holds patents in the medical device field. Aaron's leadership at Jaunt is marked by a commitment to empowering companies with the insights and strategies needed to succeed in the dynamic world of medical technology. Join us today as we explore Aaron's journey from engineer to entrepreneur and dive into his insights on innovation, market intelligence, and the future of MedTech. Aaron, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the first question, the same one I ask everyone. What made you decide to become an engineer?
Yeah, growing up, I was just always interested in tinkering in technologies. We had one of the first Macintosh computers. I kind of followed the Apple story as it was unfolding back in the 80s. And my parents subscribed to Popular Science magazine for me as well. And so always tinkering, always interested in those types of technologies. And when I grew up and I was deciding what to do for college, I was really interested in engineering and all the technologies that are associated with that. But I was also interested in life sciences and medicine. And just through a whim, really, I found biomedical engineering that was able to integrate the two sciences, and it seemed like a perfect fit for me at the time. And I could use the analytical skills in the life science field. And so that's the direction we went.
I don't know if you remember this, Aaron, but many years ago, for those of you listening, Aaron and I have known each other for quite some time now. But many years ago, when I was first introduced to you at a company where I used to work and you had applied to work, it was really funny because we were like doppelgangers. That's how I was first introduced to you. My manager back then, he said, "Hey, I talked to a really interesting guy today. He's your digital twin. His name is Aaron. He spent some time living in Japan, just like you. He has a degree in biomedical engineering, just like you. And there was something else. I can't remember what it was now, but there were all these I think it was snowboarding. You guys both snowboarded, something like that."
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that was wild.
Yeah, and here we are, many gray hairs later. Wow.
Yeah, I've got a lot more than you do, that looks like. But
oh, my beard. I'm getting them in my beard for sure. Just the other day, I noticed a few sparklies in what is remaining of my head of hair. So they're there for sure. All right. Well, Jaunt specializes in Class 1 and Class 2 medical devices as well as digital health tech. Can you elaborate on that a little bit and speak to some of the unique challenges and opportunities that you face in these specific areas?
Yeah. People ask us if there's a specific vertical that we specialize in within medicine. And I like to tell them that, Class 1, Class 2 is really where we focus. But beyond that, it's a huge gamut, and it's getting bigger. For the past 10 years, I feel like the digital element or the connected devices element of the technologies that we're working with just continues to grow. AI is part of, the strategies and technologies that we're working with these days. And so it's, MedTech and med device is what we focus on. we don't get into biotech and pharma strictly because, they're a wildly different animal from a business model perspective. But some of the challenges that we see in class 1 and class 2 is that, bringing these devices to market is, I like to think of it as kind of, it's a giant puzzle, right? There's so many different pieces of this puzzle as you're envisioning a technology that could help out patients, could help out hospitals, help out medicine. There's so many different pieces of this that have to come together in a perfect fashion to make it all work. I mean, whether it be reimbursement or clinical results or the technology itself, FDA regulations, clinical data. I already said that one, but value assessments and economics. There's so much that has to come together to make a product successful in the market. Those are the challenges that we deal with all the time. 25 years ago, Aaron, you could probably attest to this, but the biggest question in technology development was, what's the FDA pathway? Can you get it, through the FDA? And we don't see that much anymore. I mean, it's a pretty clear process, and there's some known entities there, but it's what is happening in the market. How can you displace the competitors that are out there today to get this thing to be successful? And all those other pieces of that puzzle that have to come together perfectly.
So this is a really interesting topic for me. Walk us through how you do that. I mean, you're looking at product market fit. You're basically doing due diligence, right? As you work with startups and investors, I guess. What are the stages that you go through? What are some of the tools that you use to determine whether a product has a fit in the market?
Yeah. Early on, I started off in the trenches of hardcore engineering and building, technologies with my hands. But I found myself always asking this question of why are we building this? Are we building the right thing, right? And so I started studying a lot of theories and technologies and books, Innovator's Dilemma being one of them, of, how technologies can actually disrupt markets and become wildly successful. Because in the startup world that I've been in my entire career, that's what you have to be able to do, is raise funds, disrupt a market, and be wildly successful and scalable. And so, I quickly developed this element of you have to go upstream. You have to go so far as to know the customers, what their problems are, what their needs are, what the job is that they have to be done, that they're trying to get done, and start there. 100% of companies and technologies and startups fail because they didn't get customers, 100% of them. And that's for a lot of different reasons, but the number one reason is, and we like to say, companies don't fail because the technology doesn't work. They fail because we didn't understand the market requirements. And so, so that's where we focus on helping that element. I'm not going to discount the, sometimes it's difficult to actually get the technology to work or to get the clinicals to work, but that doesn't seem to be the hardest part right now. The hardest part is, should we build it, not can we build it? And that customer element is the biggest part we spend most of our time on.
That's a really interesting insight. Not can we build it, but should we build it? I assume that you have a lot of deals that come across your desk. If you were, I don't know if you even can do this, but if you were to think about all the different deals that you've evaluated, is there a percentage you think, kind of a rule of thumb, that like this percentage is a market fit? 8 out of 10, there is no market fit, and we find that out within whatever it is, a month or 2 months or something, and maybe 2 out of 10 actually go somewhere.
The rule of thumb in venture capital is, 8 out of 10 fail, 1 returns, a good portion of your money, and then 1 is a home run hit. And I used to believe that there was a clear line in the sand where you say, okay, all these are crap. If you say no 100% of the time, you're going to be right 80% of the time, right? I used to think that was true, but what I've seen, what I've experienced even more of is the initial concept might be wrong 80, 90% of the time, or 99% of the time, really, from what I've experienced. But as you continue to work on it, right, as you continue to have this staying power to being able to understand the true needs of the customer, that you can start to massage it even closer and closer and closer to exactly what they need and what's going to be successful, right? So some of them are so far off that you're just not going to get there, and the people in charge of it aren't going to get it there, right? But when somebody comes to us and we're evaluating something, it's not that we say to them, here, all the data came back and said you should stop now. It's that all the data comes back and says, you're going this direction correctly. These other 5 directions you're going incorrectly. And here's the data that shows you how we need to navigate it in a different direction for it to be successful. And so it's very strategic in nature, as opposed to a binary statistic, if you will.
Yeah, interesting. So a customer comes to you, says, Aaron, we've got this new technology, this product that we would like to launch. You go out, you do your research, and you find 99 times out of 100 or whatever it is that this is not quite the right fit, but it's close enough that we can make some tweaks to get it to be truly the right fit for the market. Is that right?
Yeah, that's about right.
Terrific. Okay. Can you share some of the tools that you use? Like the customer comes to you and says, I've got this technology, I want to launch it. What are you doing? Like boots on the ground, what are some of the tactical skills that you've had to develop and the tools that you use to go out and do that research, find the data, and then be able to present that data to these customers? Is it just like, what are they called? Where you get a group of people together and you show them the product and you ask the questions. the name is escaping me right now, but is it that kind of thing?
Focus group.
Thank you. Focus groups, like focus groups, or are there like data fields out there that you know specifically and you can mine insights from? How does that work?
Yeah. So the interesting thing is we like to draw a line between what we call disruptive innovation and sustaining innovation. And let me describe those a little bit further. So sustaining innovation is, let's go find out what our customers want in relationship to products that we already have on the market or products that they're already using. And let's tweak those. Let's tweak our own product a little bit better to make more customers like it, to get closer to, the customers that aren't buying it, to improve it even better, clinically speaking, or whatever it might be. That's what we call sustaining innovation. In those scenarios, it is focus groups, brand strategies, things like that tell us a lot about what the market wants. It was, early on I had a lady that I worked with say, hey, Aaron, it doesn't matter what we think. What matters is what the market thinks. And that's true, across the board here. So in the sustaining innovation, focus groups and some of those work really well. What we found is on the disruptive innovation side of the equation, where you're actually creating almost a new category in every scenario, where you're coming in and asking people to change the way they're thinking, change their processes, to use something drastically new, which is a tall order in medicine because they have something that's at least working decently well for their patients. In a lot of cases, sometimes they have nothing that's working well, and some indications that we're working with, but asking them to change all that is disruptive. It's a lot more work. And so you can't just come to them and say, what do you think of this? Is this going to work? Do you like this idea? It's more what's the word? It's more discovery in nature than that. And so rather than focus groups, we walk through a process, and that process is, number one, starting with the problem and the needs that are in the market. And we don't say, go out there and say, hey, what's your problem with surgery, with laparoscopic surgery, as a for instance, we go out there and we probe and we get deep and we try to get them out of their element to understand and start to complain about things that they wish was different, or and from that, it's an art form in nature as you start to get into what are the problems. And then from there, you get into how are they solving that today? I'm just going to use laparoscopy because it's probably a decently easy example. How do you solve, fogging of the lens? Oh, we take it out, we wipe it, right? And so you start to see this process of standard of care that they're doing today to solve that problem. And from there, you can start to derive a value proposition of a product that might be able to interject itself into this process and be a solution for them instead. And so that discovery element is hugely important. And you ask about tools. So we do that a lot through secondary research. We do a lot of primary research. That primary research starts with qualitative, where we're actually talking to these physicians and getting deep into how they're utilizing things, how they're not utilizing things, problems they're having, the way they make decisions in these technologies. And then we get into quantitative really quickly, actually. And we say across the entire United States, what do 100 physicians say about these problems and needs? What are they going to say about the value proposition that we're presenting and the details within that value proposition? So those are some of the tools that we use in the discovery marketing side, discovery innovation side of this equation.
So it sounds like it's a lot of conversations with people as opposed to, I don't know, like data mining or something.
Yeah, 100%. There is a huge data mining element to it because the clinical economics is becoming even more and more important. And not only the clinical economics, but the healthcare economics, the dollars and cents, but there's more economics than just the dollar side of that. That starts to have a lot of analysis that's associated with it. But yes, there's definitely that soft element of what are the decisions that a physician or a BAC member, or a provider or payer is going to make in these scenarios that we need to understand and fit within.
That sounds like a lot of fun, almost like being a detective in a way, right?
Yeah. I like that description.
Can you think of a experience? I'm sure there are many of them, but I'm sure your work is pretty confidential, so maybe there's some things you can share and some things you can't. But if there is a scenario that you can share, a story where you had a customer come to you and they were looking for your help with product market fit and due diligence, and you were able to go out and learn some things from your network of physicians or healthcare professionals, wherever they are, and came back with some data that you were able to use to make concrete decisions, and maybe there was a tweak to the product or the technology that was originally presented, and then ultimately, it led to a successful launch.
Yeah. So I've been doing this for about 8 years, and what's interesting is the timelines. A lot of them are still in the process.
Oh,
right?
interesting. So wow.
That full gamut. I've got a couple of examples, but not a lot. But the first one that comes to mind is we had a client come to us. They're a platform technologies, and we work a lot with platform technologies because there's a lot of decisions that need to go into which market should we go after first, or which segment should we go after first, and so we're working with the company in a specific market. And their board challenged them and said, okay, this technology can be applicable to a lot of different markets. In fact, they identified, I think, 12 or 13 different markets that it could be applicable in. And as a board member, as a CEO, and as the decision makers of a fairly large company like that, you're not just going to make those decisions on a whim. And so you're looking at a lot of different variables that come into those decisions, market size being one of them, applicability, clinical feasibility, technical feasibility. I mean, there's so many different factors that come into play here to say, can we build the right product? Is there a need for that product there? Is that product going to be successful there? And can we make a good chunk of money? And so what's the best investment opportunity? And so the company came to us and said, hey, can you run market opportunity analyses on all 13 of these markets? Pit them up against each other, and in some sort of analytical format to show which one's going to rise to the top and why, based on criteria and weighting of those criteria. And there was a whole custom weighting that we put together for it. And so we did that, and we walked through this customer-centric approach that showed where all these different markets were going to land with all these different variables. And they presented that to the board, and the board was ecstatic. They basically said, who did this, and they said, well, Jaunt did. And they're like, well, this is amazing work. And I love hearing things like that when we put some soul and effort into our work. And And they said, this is spot on. Let's go with, number one, number two on the list here. And they made those decisions from that data. And so that's what we aim to have happen, is having these strategic decisions become ridiculously clear because we pulled this data together to show you the facts. And so that they were able to make that decision and move forward. And last I heard, that product is doing really well in that number one market that they hadn't even started to go after yet.
Wow.
They're going in a different direction previously. And a lot of really good results, and a lot of good feedback. And so I like to think that market analysis work that we did for them helped them make those right decisions.
That's a great success story. Thank you for sharing that. That must be kind of a rush for you, right? When things like that happen, everything lines up.
Yeah. Sometimes it lines up well, and sometimes it lines up not so well. Sometimes I feel bad when someone says, "Hey, can you run this full market analysis?" And I say, "Yeah, sure." And it comes back, and it's just like terrible, or shows them you need to go in a wildly different direction, right? And you can just see them getting deflated. I'm like, "Hey, I'm not telling you to go this direction. I'm just telling you what the data is saying." And most of the time they take our advice, but that does happen a lot.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure it does. What are some of the most common challenges that you've seen in startups in the medical device world?
I was at JP Morgan this week meeting with a lot of startups. And so I saw a lot of decks, a lot of pitches, and we go through hundreds of decks every year. The biggest one that I see, and again, this is my lens, but is the executives a lot of times have a hard time articulating what the problem is. And defining that problem in such a way that their solution is, the most grand all be all solution for that specific problem. And because, we work with a bunch of investors too, and that's what the investors need to see. They need to see that, number one, this problem exists. It's a big problem, that it's a hard problem, right? That you just solved it. And so we're off to the races. And so they need to see that this is going to be wildly successful before they even get to market. And I'm talking pre-commercial, it's seed, Series A, Series B type of raises. But that's what I see a lot of is, when I'm looking at a deck with an executive for the first time, and I'm going through the deck, my eyes immediately go to, okay, what's the problem? Can you help me define this? And they'll say it. And I'm like, let's dig deeper, that's not exactly the problem. That's not why they're going to choose you over what they're using today, because you have to give them a huge reason to choose that. There's so many examples of devices that have done, incrementally better than what the standard of care is, but just don't make it. They fall flat because, they weren't hitting the right problem, or they weren't solving, didn't know the nuances of how the physicians were going to make decisions within the processes that they're working within. So that's one of the biggest things that I see.
Nice. Okay, I'm going to take a very short break and share with the listeners that our company, Pipeline Design and Engineering, develops new and innovative manufacturing processes for complex products, then implements them into manual fixtures or fully automated machines to dramatically reduce production costs and improve production yields for OEMs. Today, we're speaking with Aaron Call. So, Aaron, you started off as an engineer. I guess you're always an engineer, so you're still an engineer, and kind of transitioned into the role that you're in today, owner of Jaunt. Can you talk a little bit about that journey, how you went from engineer to entrepreneur, and how did your engineering background influence the way that you run your business?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that. Started off in the trenches of engineering and just designing and technologies, building technologies, largely in the cardiovascular space. But but as I started to ask those questions of, are we building the right thing? I started writing the product requirements, not only for myself, but for other engineers, and saying, okay, this is what we need to build, right? And that was from looking at the market. But that core engineering element largely has stuck with me and stayed within me from the perspective of, when I look at a market need, I look at the data that's associated with that and let that dictate what we do, right? And the data that's associated with that, but then also there are some gut feels, some qualitative, some soft elements to, which direction should we go? What should we build? That comes into play there. But I take that engineering approach, that analytical mindset to decipher what exactly we should be doing. And that helps tremendously in what we should build. It helps tremendously in defining the market, the problem, the needs that we've been talking about. But it also helps with a huge element, which is health economics and the value analysis, because that is dollars. That is some hard analysis and calculations that has to happen, because the hospital is going to hold you to it once you come to market. They say, hey, what's your value analysis estimates on this new technology? And so all that engineering mindset, analysis mindset, I utilize to help, use data to position products for more successful commercialization.
Yeah, I think that engineers make some of the best business owners because we have that analytical mindset, right? One of the most important things I think we get from our education in engineering is how to learn and how to analyze systems. And that, for me anyway, has been super helpful as a business owner. You mentioned economics, and before we started recording, we talked a little bit about this. I'd love to hear your take on the current state of the economy, especially as it relates to MedTech engineering. Where have we been the past year, and where do you think we're going in the next year?
Yeah. So in terms of fundraising, maybe that's more specifically what I can speak about. But in 2023, fundraising was down drastically. Venture firms just weren't out as much as we're used to them being in the past, and particularly during the years of post-COVID, where digital health just took a huge growth curve in investments. It was down about 50% from the year before, in 2023. Funds largely are not doing multiple deals; they're doing single deals. I forget the last number of analysis we ran, but it was only a handful of funds out there were doing more than one deal in 2023. And so everyone was really in this like conserve mode. Let's be really careful with every dollar that we have. Let's run as many bridge loans as we can to at least just stay alive, get through this, right? And so it was really interesting to watch and see. In the past, you could say good companies get funded, but in 2023 and currently, it's like only exceptional companies are getting funded. And even then, there's this weird element of bookends of companies where some companies, some funds are deciding to go more seed stage, more early, so that they can get in early and stay with that company and give them the staying power they need and follow on rounds that they need moving on. Others are just sticking with, investments that they've already made. And so I was at JP Morgan this past week, and largely the sentiment is everyone's really, really hopeful for 2024. I was talking to an attorney that said they just filed the first IPO for 2024. That was all super exciting for everybody because the IPO markets have been dead. And so the IPO market's coming back, the debt market's coming back, seem to be what's going to fuel this backlog, this log jam of venture investing, because the money's there. It's just, the LPs aren't pushing on them as much. The VCs are just being slow to react. And so the long story to say that I think the sentiment is that 2024 is going to be a lot better than 2023. However, it's still really early. What are we, 2 weeks in now? So I think it's a lot of people being hopeful and hoping that these things are coming with very, very small trickles of evidence that it's actually going to be that way. But I am definitely in the bullish camp from that perspective.
Well, let's cross our fingers that hope leads to actual improvement. Yeah. What advice would you give to engineers or entrepreneurs that are looking to enter the medical device industry?
Yeah. I would say for engineers, marketing, sales, everybody needs to truly understand the the customer, the end user, right? And we have a lot of customers in medicine. We have, we call them the 5 Ps in startups, but let's talk about 4 of them: the payers, the providers, the patients, and then the physicians. And so you have to truly understand all those customers, those end users, that you're designing these devices for. And, everybody within the med device field can benefit from understanding how all that works. And so engineers are going to engineer things better. The marketers are going to be able to communicate those better. The salespeople are going to be able to talk about those better. Clinical people are going to be able to design clinical studies and data for that better. And so truly understanding that end user and the needs of all those customers, I think, is a hugely important element.
What do you think the future of MedTech holds? I mean, 3-5 years from now, what do you see the future of medical device technology heading?
Well, AI is the buzzword, and rightfully so. There's so many interesting things happening with AI right now that it's almost really hard to keep up with. It was all the talk in the last 3 conferences I've been at. We've run webinars on them. We've worked with other people at running webinars on them. We're educating ourselves as much as we can on generative AI and analytical AI and everything in between. So, not to be cliche, but that is an element that is going to continue. We're going to continue to see that affect technologies moving forward. And I don't think it's going to affect, the core med device side of the equation as quickly as it will affect some of the inefficiencies in healthcare administration, for instance, and some of the decisions and the way things are ran, and the empowerment that comes to patients, for instance. I think we're going to see insurance start to change a little bit. So it's going to start to change how this huge ship kind of runs and operates. And then on the technology side, medicine, pharma, biotech, all of them are going to start to use AI in a new and unique way that just makes everything speed up, I believe. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. I know it sounds a little bit cliche because everyone's talking about it, but it's absolutely true. There's some amazing things that's happening with it right now.
I'm super excited for this. I mean, AI has already transformed the way that I work, and I just, who knows what, like you said, it's really hard to even keep up with the changes that are happening today, let alone, what is it going to lead to 3-5 years from now?
Just to that point, a year ago, I didn't use ChatGPT at all.
Yeah, me either.
I use it every single day now, and mainly from an education standpoint, but it's doing so much more beyond that. It's amazing. And so we're going to see that in healthcare.
We just started a really interesting initiative that I think a lot of the listeners would be interested in as well, where we have transcripts for all of these podcast episodes, right? And what we've done is we've taken all those transcripts and combined them into a single PDF document, and then we've uploaded it to a ChatGPT agent, and then we can query this agent and say, tell me about the episode I had with Aaron Call. And what were the, top 5, give me a summary of it. What were some of the key insights that we should take away from that episode? And it's amazing. It just spits it out, So I think what we're going to do, we haven't really nailed down exactly how to use it yet, but probably what we'll do is just make it publicly available and anyone can tap into that. And we have, 230 some odd interviews now with high performing engineers. So it's almost like having the collective knowledge of all the information these engineers have shared at your fingertips. So you can just, type something in, pretend that you're a senior mentor for an engineering student. I'm having this issue right now. What should I do? Spit back an answer. Pretty cool stuff. Just amazing how it accelerates the work that we're doing.
So true. Yeah. I think OpenAI don't quote me on this, but they just opened their store, right? Their GPT store,
right?
Where you can create these agents like you talk about, customize them and deploy them. And yeah, we use 2 or 3 on our end daily.
Amazing. Yeah, I love it. Well, we're getting towards the end here. Before we wrap up, can you walk us through the process of how a startup gets funded? You shared a few terms earlier: Series A funding, Series B funding, seed stage funding, pre-commercial. Maybe define some of those terms, and then wrap around that the summary of like what's the process, A to Z of how a startup gets funded.
Yeah, we're starting this one. So there's so many different options for funding, and so many different theses on the investor's investment for these type of companies that I think everything starts with the executive or the founder truly understanding what they have, right? I mean, do they have $100 million market DME product, for instance, that is going to compete in a fairly crowded space, or do they have a $1.2 billion market opportunity with a disruptive technology? And those are wildly different animals, right? And so I think first and foremost, it starts with truly objectively understanding what you have, and knowing that every time you go to raise funds to help you move a technology or a company forward, you're in a market. You're going to be competing with everybody else that wants funding as well. And so you have to, first get into the right swim lane. And that swim lane starts with probably you bootstrapping something and going to what we call the 3Fs, the friends and family and fools, that maybe don't understand the nuances of what you're getting into yet, but believe that you're going to make something happen. There's angels that can help you kind of in those initial stages. They're going to be looking for probably 20x return on any sort of mathematical ROI that you are running for them with the finances that you're proposing. But then at least get you started. Those seed and pre-seed rounds are sub 1 to 2 million, typically speaking, and are in your more personal realm of investors. After that, Series A, when you're typically getting into, and this is different depending on Class 1 versus Class 2, digital health, and so many different things, but Series A is largely where you're wrapping up your product and getting ready to go commercial. Between Series A and Series B is where you're raising your funds to go commercial. I don't profess to know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but I think typical Series A rounds in the MedTech, med device space are somewhere in the $15 to $20 million raise. Those you're typically going to go with your VCs, your venture capitalists, your institutional investors. They're going to put some pretty strong diligence on you to make sure that you're going in the right direction. And then from there, it's execution, right? It's all about the executive raising the right amount of money, having the right amount of money to reach the right milestone. And that waterfall calculation that you have to do from the beginning, will really map out how much money you need, how much equity you're going to give away, what the opportunity is, and what that looks like, and building that story for these investors. So there's so much to it, but maybe that's a decent little
That's a great summary. How far along are these companies typically when they get their first significant round of funding, whether it's an angel investor or a venture capitalist, but they're getting millions of dollars? Are companies oftentimes putting millions of dollars into their development before they get any funding, or is it all across the board? Some are just starting out and have hardly done anything, and others have put $10 million into it.
Yeah, all across the board. And it all depends on how disruptive that technology is and the opportunity is going to be, right?
Yeah.
If you have an amazing solution for a big problem that nobody can solve right now, then you're going to get institutional investors that say, hey, that's worth a $10 million bet just to get you to do an MVP or something, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I say it all starts with understanding like what and defining what lane you're going to be in, knowing your market size, knowing how disruptive you're going to be, how big of a problem you're actually solving. It's a tough question to answer, but we do see a lot of technologies getting started with grant funding as well, non-dilutive grant funding to at least get them through some of those research phases that the government's willing to fund where investors are not. And we are seeing investors coming earlier and earlier to start to fund some of that research, but most investors, I would say, want to see that you have de-risked the technology and the market enough to start to move forward to where they can visualize this a successful path towards full scale adoption.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Well, great. We're coming towards the end of our show here. Aaron, before we leave, what is, within the context of your role as an engineer, because you're always an engineer, what is one thing that frustrates you and one thing that brings you joy?
Yeah, I'd say on the frustration side, it is probably largely because I am an engineer that it frustrates the heck out of me when I see executives just completely blowing smoke about a technology or a concept, or a market size, and they say it's $1 billion market. And I'm like, it's actually a $50 million market, because the analyst in me is saying, no, those calculations are not working. So that drives me crazy when they're just telling this crazy BS story, and blowing smoke, and then people buy it. And that's what drives me crazy, When I'm like, no, there's actually a mathematical equation to tell you that he's blowing smoke.
This is wrong.
So, yeah, but it's just wrong. And then 3 years later, they completely fail, and you're like, oh my gosh, why can't people do this math?
Now, I'm curious, is it investors that buy into that also, or are these just like lay people that?
Oh yeah,
really?
Yeah, don't even get me started. I mean, the whole Holmes thing is a huge, it's a case study in that, where the past 20 years has been a huge element of what I call FOMO investing, because money has been so cheap that you can raise a fund and just say, hey, we're going to do follow-on investments. We're not going to do due diligence. We're just, this investor put into them. We trust them, so let's go dump our tons of money into there, and they don't even do these calculations. And to me, I'm sitting back thinking, these are so easy to do. You can take a VC fund to 50% or higher success rate rather than 10 to 20%. If you just do these engineering analytical calculations, right? So it happens all the time. So that's a huge frustration of mine, because I think we can engineer our way out of this from a diligence perspective. And the joys is, just having that vision and working on that vision with an executive or an investor and saying, I see it. We see what can be done, how this can help patients, and then watching that come to fruition and actually getting there and patients being, affected by that, and seeing that product come to light the way you envisioned it, I think is a huge joy. And that's, both of those are the internal engineering mind of me chugging away, I believe.
Wonderful. I love it. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for joining me today. What a pleasure it has been to catch up. We haven't had the opportunity to hang out in a while, so it was good to catch up anyway and provide all kinds of really super helpful, valuable, and interesting content for all these engineers who are listening today. So thank you again for being with us. How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Aaron. It's been a pleasure. You can get in touch with me via email or go to our website. Our website is jauntup.com. That's JAUNTUP.com. And my email is just Aaron, AARON, @jauntup.com. So that's the best way to get in touch with us.
Terrific. So for all you MedTech startups out there who need help with due diligence, give Aaron a call. That was funny. Give Aaron a call. I didn't plan that. Sorry, that was lame. You're probably like, yeah, never mind. Okay.
We get it all the time.
Yeah, I bet. On that note, thank you very much, Aaron.
Thank you.
I'm Aaron Monker, founder of Pipeline Design and Engineering. If you liked what you heard today, please share the episode. To learn how your team can leverage our team's expertise developing turnkey equipment, custom fixtures, and automated machines, and with product design, visit us at teampipeline.us. Thanks for listening.